Welcome to Lynnwood Election Watch 2013, our continuing interviews with candidates for Lynnwood City Council and Mayor. And right now we have James Deal, who is running for Council Position 1. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
It's great to see you. And as we've done with the other interviews, give you a chance to talk a little bit about why you're running for Lynnwood City Council and what you are, just how long you've been in the city and kind of your background.
Okay, I'm a lawyer. I graduated from the University of Washington, and I've been in the Northwest since 1970. I went to law school to be an environmental attorney, but when I graduated, the only paying jobs for environmental attorneys were working for polluters, so I became a real estate attorney. What I do right now, my wife and I have a very small law office, just the two of us, and we help people modify their mortgages and do foreclosure defense. So last year I ran for lieutenant governor, and the reason I did is because I am outraged and incensed that we put toxic waste in our drinking water. It's called fluoride, but it's not fluoride. It's fluorosilicic acid, and it contains lead, arsenic, mercury, cadmium, thallium, and it is slightly radioactive. And I brought the documents to prove it. So I love to garden. I have a house surrounded by fruit trees and raised beds in the back and a terrace with all kinds of edibles that we eat. I've been a vegan vegetarian for over 30 years. And I do that for environmental reasons because there are 7 billion of us now. When I was born, there were 1/3 of that many, 2.3 billion. The population has tripled in my lifetime. So we need to be more conscious of the heavy footprint that we put on this earth. And one of those heavy footprints is that the phosphate fertilizer industry can only operate if it has a way to get rid of the byproducts. And one of those byproducts going up the smokestack when they make phosphate fertilizer is fluorosilicic acid. So they used to just put it up the smokestack and it poisoned the neighborhood and killed the cows and burned the crops, and the companies got sued. So they figured out that they could put it in the drinking water and call it fluoride. Well, fluoridation started with sodium fluoride, which is a different chemical, but there wasn't enough of it. So then they switched over to the cheaper grade industrial fluoride. The naturally occurring fluoride is calcium fluoride, which is relatively harmless. You don't want to drink it, a lot of it, for life. But that's very different from industrial fluoride, which contains no calcium to buffer it. So, am I going too fast?
No.
So, people say, well, why would we add lead to our drinking water? We know that lead is extremely harmful. Lead and arsenic affect proteins. They affect the sulfur atom in a protein and change the angle on it so the protein, the enzyme, cannot do its job. So it negatively impacts the thyroid, the pineal. It's bad on the kidney. You can only excrete half of it, and the rest of it goes into your bones and builds up your whole lifetime. So old people have fractured, broken hips, and it transports aluminum past the brain barrier, so it causes or worsens Alzheimer's disease. So prove it, James, that there's lead and arsenic being added to our drinking water. This is the Everett certificate of analysis that's delivered with each tanker truck of this so-called fluoride. Right here, it says arsenic is 0.45 parts per million, and lead 11 parts per million. It says hydrogen fluoride is 0.48 parts per million. Hydrogen fluoride is just as bad and worse in some ways because it can easily pass through the fatty lipid layer of the stomach and the fatty lipid layer that protects the brain, and it can carry aluminum and other metals into the brain and throughout the body.
Okay, now, I need to ask you, because we need to have some issues that we want to get through. So, I'm assuming that, I know this is an important issue and something that you want to talk about, but
But there are other issues.
there are other issues, and I'm
Okay.
assuming that you care about those as well.
I
If you
do.
were going to be on the Lynnwood City Council, you would want to be
Right.
addressing some of the other ones too. So let's see if maybe we can kind of get some summary of that when we get toward the end of the
We'll return
the
to
show.
that
We will
issue.
return.
Okay.
So, and one of the things that I think, we talk about, of course, environmental issues, and of course, Sound Transit is going to be bringing Link Light Rail into Lynnwood in hopes of, and there's the train. We didn't even talk about that.
Yes,
Kind of a
the
nice
coal
segue.
trains.
We are in Edmonds. We have to fess up when we hear there is no train in Lynnwood like this anyway. But what is the thinking from your perspective about bringing Link Light Rail into Lynnwood, and in particular the maintenance facility that they want to build, that I guess has created some conflict on the council. In fact, I think they voted to oppose it. Do you have any feelings about that one way or the other?
Well, since 1996, we've been working on light rail.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be another 10 years before it even gets here. And I don't think it'll ever get to Everett, and I don't think it'll ever get to Tacoma. I think it's a crying shame that the Chinese can plan and build a bullet train in 4 years, and it takes us 30 years to build a minimal light rail system. As to exactly where the station should be located, I don't have a position on that. I will rely upon the experts to make a good decision. I'll study it and have my input into it. My point, if you go to jamesrobertdeal.org and go to the transit section, I want to talk about how do you get people to the light rail station. 1,300 parking spaces, and they're all full at 7:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm. At the transit center.
Yes. What I have suggested on my website, jamesrobertdeal.org, is that we have a flex van system where people can pay a reasonable fee, and in the morning, a van will pick you up at your house in Lynnwood, Edmonds, Mount Lake Terrace, and bring you to the transit center. Because what good is Link Light Rail if people can't get there? It's very hard to use the bus system to get there. And another thing that I feel strongly about is that we have all these buses driving around. Either they're jam-packed, the ones going to Seattle, and people don't have a place to park to get on the buses. The other problem is that we have all these other buses, the local buses, who drive around mostly empty most of the time. It's a pretend bus system. So I would ask the city council to do what's necessary to have me serve, maybe on Sound Transit Board, Community Transit Board, so that I can put some input into this, because we have a lot of people who are too poor to be able even to afford a car. And the bus system is very inefficient, and the only time I use the bus is to go to Seattle, because I don't want to wait in the rain, in the dark, and have people leer at me as they drive by, like, who are you? You can't afford a car? That's basically what people are thinking, I assume. So a flex van system could be used to pick people up where they live and take them to where they're going. And within certain limits, this would be a workable system, and people would be able to pay extra for it. The cab drivers would like it, because my cab driver friends tell me that they spend 75% of their time just waiting for somebody to call them for a ride. So all this is discussed on my website at jamesrobertdeal.org. But yes, I'm all in favor of Link Light Rail. I think it was a good thing to start it. I think we should have a bigger bond issue and get it finished.
Okay. What you mentioned, the fact that there are, people who just even can't afford cars. Lynnwood obviously is in an area where there's a growing number of people from different cultures. The population is changing. There's more older people. The Lynnwood itself, their average income is about $18,000 less than the rest of, Snohomish County. How would you, as a council member, deal with that diverse population, more older people, that older population is increasing. Do you have some ideas on that and how
Well,
you
that's a
would?
hard question. I think transportation is a very important thing. Talked to a lady from Mexico, and she says, bad transit, no transportation. Well, our transportation compared to the Philippines, where I've spent a whole lot of time, is really poor. You can go down out in the street in the Philippines and pick up a ride immediately and get anywhere you're going, and you don't need to own a car. So that's why I've brought up the flex van idea. And when we're talking about the poor, why don't we talk about the minimum wage? The state law, we have the highest minimum wage in the country, but it's still not enough. The minimum wage law in the state allows cities to have a higher minimum wage than the one set by the state. Now, even if it were only 50 cents higher, that would make a symbolic statement to our politicians, our state politicians, even our federal politicians, that people need to be paid more. The rich have gotten richer. I've done pretty well, but the poor are getting poorer, and the middle class is kind of sliding backwards, and they have no retirement. So we always talk about the middle class. What about the poor? And I think that you've raised a very interesting question, a difficult question, but it's one that I'd like to pay some attention to. And if people could get to work, and if they could get to the grocery store, and they could live a better life on a lower income. And you know, a lot of people would go from being two-car families to one-car families. I know a lot of people who have cars who would prefer not to drive because they're old. They're not ready for paratransit. They don't need paratransit because they're not in a wheelchair. But they don't like to drive because they don't see well at night. Mm-hmm. My relatives from the Philippines came and lived with us for 5 years, and they were housebound. We had to drive them everywhere. So transportation, maybe a better minimum wage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. There's some other issues that have kind of gotten people's attention over the years, and I've asked these questions of other candidates. So one of them is when you talk about business development in Lynnwood and trying to, obviously there have been budget problems at the city, and they've been laying off folks and trying to figure out new revenue streams and things like that. And one of the things that has been talked about is the fact that, trying to bring more businesses into town, and there's been some feeling, at least among some, that Lynnwood doesn't have a reputation of being very friendly to small businesses coming in and starting up. And I wondered if you'd heard that. I mean, you're probably, as an attorney in your own practice, you're probably sort of a small business owner yourself. Mm-hmm. Have you heard that or felt that yourself?
I think Lynnwood's been very business friendly to me.
That's good.
And I lived in Seattle. I lived in Mount Lake Terrace. I've now lived in Lynnwood for 6 years. I like it. It's a prosperous community. So I'm proud of it. Mm-hmm. So these are issues I would study with an open mind. I really do my homework. These
yes,
are
I can tell.
printouts from my website, which you can read at jamesrobertdeal.org.
Okay. And what about red light cameras? Do you have any thoughts about those?
Well, I think they tend to be intrusive. And maybe they should be used at high danger zones. But as a routine matter, I'm not in favor of them. I know that driving past the Edmonds Elementary School, I got nailed 3 or 4 times before I finally figured out, slow down. Because you really didn't see the light until it was too late. Mm-hmm. So, but at least they're not reported to your insurance company. They don't go in the state index that affects your insurance rates. But I know that a lot of people don't like them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I've understood. Although some people seem to think that the citizens have gotten used to them and maybe even find some value in them in terms of getting people to slow down. So we'll see where that goes.
I have an open mind.
Yeah. And I know another thing that's been in the news quite a bit lately has been this issue with the golf course in Lynnwood.
Oh, I have a lot to say about that.
Oh, okay. Well, tell me what you have to say about the golf course.
We've played golf for 400 or 500 years. The Scots out in their kilts. They played golf on the tundra almost of Scotland. No trees, And they didn't have to have a perfectly manicured lawn to play golf on. Nevertheless, we're spending tens of thousands of dollars a year on deadly chemicals that we put on our golf course to kill broadleaf weeds and to kill the moss. And there are green golf courses. And the president recently played on one where they don't use any pesticides. You can take care of moss with soapy water. You can take care of broadleaf with scalding water or with vinegar. So we need to return to some good things about the past. Just because some salesman comes to the city council and sells them tens of thousands of dollars worth of pesticides doesn't mean we should be spraying them all over the environment. The water runoff from the golf course goes into Perrinville Creek and empties into Puget Sound. Then we've got trucks that were going up and down the streets spraying Roundup just because there were some weeds growing in a half-inch crack, but they were spraying them over a 4-foot wide area. And all of this, of course, goes in Puget Sound. So we all lament the passing of the salmon. But why are we putting fish poisoning waste into the water? Also, it's bad for humans. You hear about breast cancer rates among women golf professionals and testicular cancer rates among male golf professionals. Maybe the golf course could be a success if we advertised it as a green golf course. It's green and it's green. In other words, you can come here without exposing yourself to the risk of cancer. But as it is, it looks like it's an unprofitable endeavor. Maybe it should be turned into a general use park. But I'm open-minded to any rational solution. But you know, when it's not raining, most of the water that goes to the treatment center and then goes into the ocean is the same 1 part per million fluoride that is in your drinking water, because you eat or drink only about 1% of that water. 99% of it gets flushed down the commode, it goes down through the washing machine, it goes down the shower, and it goes right into the treatment plant, which cannot remove the fluoride. And here's the article on the subject of what fluoride does to salmon. It narcotizes the brain and they swim in circles. This has been documented through numerous studies, all of which you can find at jamesrobertdeal.org. Nevertheless, we continue to put this stuff in our water and in ourselves. And it's most harmful to fetuses. So a pregnant mother should not be drinking tap water. Young children especially should not be drinking it. If you have thyroid problems, you shouldn't be drinking it. And you know, I go and preach this sermon to the Everett City Council, and it's like I'm talking to a concrete wall. Because there's a guy in a white coat who heads up the county health department. And he says, oh, it does reduce dental decay. But I point out to them that his own American Dental Association says that we now have 41% of our kids with dental fluorosis, and about 10% of it is significant enough that it's ugly and it makes the kids self-conscious. And if it's doing that to your teeth, it's doing that to every bone in your body. So we hear about little old ladies who fall down and break their hips. No. Generally, they break their hips and fall down.
We got back to the fluoride issue.
We got back to the fluoride issue.
You're very skillful at that. So let's tell me about, if you were going to name Lynnwood's greatest strength and its greatest weakness, what would you say?
The people. I like the people. I like the attitude. My form of exercise used to be jogging, but that's kind of hard on your knees after drinking fluoridated water for so many years. I had a knee go and I had a meniscus tear fixed, so I ride the bike. I ride it standing up and I really work it hard. So I bike all around these neighborhoods and I've gotten to look at the cities and look at people's yards. And, you know, I'm the only person that I see who gardens. I'm the only person I see who's got fruit trees growing in the front yard. Instead of just ornamental trees, why don't we plant mulberry bushes? They produce an enormous amount of fruit. They don't need to be watered. They don't need any pesticide. And there's several other kinds of fruit trees we could be planting. No, it's the people that I like the most.
And a weakness?
The weakness? Well, I wish there were some vegetarian restaurants in Lynnwood. I have to go to Seattle for a vegetarian restaurant, but most of them use tap water to cook their food, so I don't like that. But there's a couple of vegan vegetarian restaurants that utilize reverse osmosis filtered water. And it's expensive. And if you're going to try to reverse osmosis filter your water, the cost is high and you don't know when your filter's failing. We distill our water. We get water from the well. I love the Lynnwood well. We're lucky to live within a few miles of the Lynnwood well on 164th, where I recommend you get all your drinking water. So you can either buy a distiller or go get water from the Lynnwood well. The Alderwood Water District has kept that well open. We used to have wells all over this area. And if the water is not suitable, the American Dental Association says if you have children below 6 months, they should not be drinking the tap water. That's what they said in 2006. They have withdrawn that statement under pressure. But what do poor people do to get pure water? They don't have a car to bring home big gallon jugs. Their children shouldn't be drinking the water. It's in all the food that you cook. Well, I guess we don't care about them. Now, these are generally thought of as statewide issues like a minimum wage, like transit. Well, that's sort of a countywide issue. But there's some things that the city council could do to make resolutions and appeal to our state representatives and our senators and our representatives to do something on the national or the state level. When it comes to the coal trains, that affects me because it's acidifying the water. If you like oysters and you like clams, they're very hard now to grow in Puget Sound because the water's becoming more acid because the carbon dioxide not only goes into the air, it also goes into the ocean. And the plastic bags. Well, Seattle has banned some plastic bags, and Edmonds has done the same. I think Lynnwood should look into this. I try to carry my bags with me. Plastic bags make up only about 1% of the weight of the waste stream, but about 10% of the volume. And they don't biodegrade, and they end up in the ocean, in the garbage patch, cycling in the middle of the Pacific. So we humans have become the most fearsome, the most powerful, dominating species on the planet. But along with that comes a degree of responsibility. And responsibility begins at the personal, the city, the county, the state level. We can't pass these issues off to somebody else.
Well, you have done a masterful job of staying on point for what you believe in. That's tremendous. And now is time, because we're just almost out of
Got a
time,
question?
for you to kind of summarize what
Okay.
you want people to remember about you when they see your name on the ballot. And I can't believe anybody will not remember what your website is, but you might as well mention again.
Okay. jamesrobertdeal.org, and there's a link on there to my book, which I'm very proud of. I've told you already that I'm a vegan vegetarian. I don't impose my values on other people. I do this in part as an experiment to determine whether it's feasible, and my health is perfect. I got lots of energy to put into this job. And I will be open-minded and look at both sides. I am always most eager to read opinions, documents, books, articles that disagree with my position. So I will listen to the public. I will keep an open mind. I will watch out for waste. I don't think we should be throwing money away. We should get every cent's worth out of every cent we spend, but we shouldn't be stingy either about things that we need.
Very good. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on the program and telling people what you think. Appreciate
Okay.
it. And good luck.
Thanks a lot.